Guys, what's going on? Jerome here. Welcome to part 5 of the Moto X Pure Edition versus the Nexus 6P. Are you guys tired of this stuff yet? I hope not, because I still feel like there is a lot to dig deep between both of these phones. Now, I know this is part 5 and it's my final segment for both of these phones, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to stop talking about them. It's just I can't keep doing videos every day. Again, I'm going to continue making these videos. In fact, after doing the camera comparison yesterday, I feel like I need to do a second part with a lot more pictures and a lot more testing, especially for outdoor pictures and a lot more indoor shots with a lot of low light shots. It's good to know, especially because the camera is a big deal breaker for a lot of people, and hopefully I can make another video that will help you decide which one is right for you. So what I did for this video, I want to actually go down the main things on a phone that I guess are important to me, but hopefully are also important to you, and kind of just give you some idea of what I feel like is better on one of the phone or the other. And even before I begin that, let me say that as far as the Moto X Pure Edition and the Nexus 6P, these are the two best phones you can buy for 2015, in my opinion. Now, I know there are phones like the S6 and the Note 5 that have like excellent cameras, but those phones, they go right out of contention for me because of their bloatware, because of the heavily skinned operating system. Well, the heavy skin that's added onto the Android operating system. It doesn't work for me. I won't even consider those phones, and it doesn't mean that I wouldn't try it out and see if I can deal with it, but I have tried other phones before, you know, that weren't stock Android or close to stock Android, and like I could work with it for a little bit, but after a while, I always find myself coming back to either a Motorola or a Nexus. It's really hard for me to tell you which one to buy. I know a lot of people are asking if I could only buy one, what could I buy, or which one should I buy, or which one would I buy? And I still feel like that's a matter of personal preference. Both phones do things great. They actually do almost all things great, but some, you know, one or the other does a few things better, you know, than the other phone. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go through different segments of the phone, and it's up to you then to decide whether or not these particular areas are more important to you, and that's what you're going to end up getting, or if some of them aren't deal breakers and you can live with some of these other compromises and you can go with another phone. I'm going to start with pretty much like the givens on the phone. So as far as, all right, I'm going to go one by one. So as far as both of these phones go, the first thing I want to talk about is feel, and that was actually part 1 of my video. For the feel, and you know what, there's also build quality and design, and I'm not even going to go into those two things because that is probably more opinionated than anything else. Something like that is something that you would have to figure out for yourself. But as far as feel goes, I'm giving feel to the Moto X Pure Edition. And I've said in the past, one of the reasons, well, I'll go through a couple of reasons. So one, the grip of the phone, the coated silicone rubber just has a great feel to it. Never feels like it's going to slip out of your hands. I've had it for 2 months. It hasn't slipped out of my hands yet. One, for grip. Two, the fact that this phone is shorter than the Nexus 6P. The Moto X Pure Edition is a shorter phone, but they still have the same display size. They're still both 5.7 inch phones with a 5.7 inch display. They both show resolution at 1440p. They're both great looking displays as well. And the other part of the feel that I want to get into is the fact that if and I can't really show it because I don't know how far the camera is coming down on me, but the thing is, when I put both of these phones on their back, or on the back end, or let it lay flat, the Nexus 6P is a lot more difficult to pick up than the Moto X Pure Edition. One, for the simple fact that because the phone is at its thickest in the center, it gives me some room on each side to just pick the phone up, or I can kind of push it on one end and just pick the phone up on the other. With the Nexus 6P, I have to be careful about picking it up, and these are nitpicky things, guys. So it's not that I can't pick up the Nexus 6P. Like, I can pick it up fine, but I have to give a little more care when I'm trying to grab it, or like I'm using like the tips of my fingers to like grab the very like top and bottom ends. And it's not the same as a Moto X Pure Edition, and I guess you really wouldn't know unless you had both to really see which one has a better feel. And I'll tell you this, when I have both of these phones sitting on my coffee table and I want to Chromecast something, I usually will pick up the Moto X Pure Edition more over the Nexus 6P, just because it's an easier phone to pick up. I could be laying on my couch, I can pick this phone up with no problem. Again, this is a very small and nitpicky thing, but it's an important thing. Okay, so with that being said, performance. Both of these phones perform really well. You know, the Moto X Pure Edition has an 808 Snapdragon processor, and the Nexus 6P has the 810 Snapdragon processor, which is version 2.1. I know a lot of people, they were scared of this 810 because of the previous overheating issues that the phone had. And I can tell you that I've only had this phone for a week now, but I haven't experienced any kind of overheating issues with my Nexus 6P. In fact, my Moto X Pure Edition, when it's really running, it'll run a lot hotter than my Nexus 6P would, which is very surprising because my Nexus 6P, I felt, hasn't even run hot, you know, or like really warm, or whatever you want to call it. The Moto X Pure Edition, when it's heating up, like you can feel it. On the Nexus 6P, I haven't noticed that at all. At the same time, when I use the 6P, both phones, they don't lag, but the Nexus 6P has a smoother, I guess, has a smoother flow to the phone. And again, by no means is the Moto X slow. It does what it needs to do. There's no lag on the phone, but the Nexus 6P gives you a smoother overall feel. And that also could be because of Marshmallow. And you know, the Moto X Pure Edition doesn't have Marshmallow yet, so I can't say for sure whether or not it's the performance or if it's the software. And so for performance, I'm giving it to the 6P. And you know, I was talking about Marshmallow, so let me just transition right into software updates. The fact that Marshmallow has been out now for, I don't know how long it's been, a month, more than a month, and that the Moto X Pure Edition still doesn't have it, and it's kind of frustrating because I was actually thinking that Marshmallow was going to be on the Moto X a lot sooner. So if you're looking for a phone that's going to get the fastest updates, the quickest updates, the most stock version of Android, then the Nexus 6P is for you. So as far as software and software updates go, I'm giving that to the Nexus 6P. Battery. I said this yesterday in my video, but the battery on the Nexus 6P trumps the Moto X Pure Edition hands down. You're talking about a bigger battery, Marshmallow running better, I guess, efficiency battery-wise on their operating system. The phone lasts longer. Both phones charge fast, but I'm getting more screen on time with the Nexus 6P, so the battery goes to the Nexus. Price. So price obviously is going to go to the Moto X Pure Edition. For $399.99, you can get this phone with 16 gigs of internal storage. If you add like 20 bucks, you can get a 64 gig micro SD card for expandable storage. So effectively, you would have an 80 gig phone for $420 versus the Nexus 6P. You spend $500 and you're getting 32 gigs. So for $80 cheaper, you're getting 2.5 times the storage on the Moto X Pure Edition. As far as topics go, I was going to just make a section just for features alone, but both of these phones are packed with different features that I have to detail features out. So, and and some of these features are deal breakers. I feel that they're deal breakers. For you, that's up to you to decide. So let me begin. The fingerprint sensor. Fingerprint sensor is only on the Nexus 6P. It's also on the 5X, but we're talking about the 6P and the Moto X Pure Edition. You can only get the fingerprint sensor on the 6P. The fingerprint sensor is awesome. It works well, it's fast, it's accurate. Because the Moto X doesn't have it, you know, the Nexus 6P gets a nod for their fingerprint sensor. Okay, on the Moto X Pure Edition, IR sensors. This phone has IR sensors that activates active display, so I can check my notifications, I can check the time without even having to pick up the phone, where I just wave my hand over and the screen pops up, and I can just quickly press on the display to see what notifications I have. On the Nexus 6P, the Nexus 6P has ambient display, and I'll tell you right now that it doesn't work as well as active display on the Moto X. There are no IR sensors up front. You know, for me to even check my notifications, I have to pick up the phone, and even when I pick up the phone, sometimes it doesn't activate well. So it doesn't even compare. As you know, for an IR sensor, I feel like the IR sensor and active display is underrated. It's probably one of the best features on the Moto X, and I hope that maybe in the next iteration of the Nexus, they add something like that. Because the Moto X has an IR sensor and active display, they get a nod for that. Again, expandable storage. You can store up to 128 gigs of expandable storage on this phone. On the Nexus 6P, there is no option for expandable storage, so we're gonna give a point to the Moto X. As far as gestures go, the Moto X can turn the camera on by double twisting your wrist, or you can also turn the flashlight on or off by just chopping the phone down. I'm giving a point to the Moto X for the gesture for the flashlight. It might be a small thing, but flashlight, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you guys don't use a flashlight that much, but I use it a lot. I use it a lot for work, and I use it a lot for just personal things when I'm at home, or, you know, if I need a light for something. You know, the Moto X also has the gesture to turn the camera on, but I feel like on the Nexus 6P, double tapping the power button to turn the camera on is, I actually like that better than the Moto X Pure Edition. So while the double twist is a great feature as well, I feel like the camera, to open the camera is a wash. You know, no points awarded for that, but for the flashlight, I'm going to give one to the Moto X Pure Edition. The Nexus 6P gets a point for USB Type-C. And I don't mean because it's newer technology, but the fact that USB Type-C is a reversible connector. It might be a small thing, but again, it's one of those things where you come home, you're tired, you just want to plug your phone in, you don't want to fumble on whether or not it goes right side up or the other way around. Hopefully all, you know, newer phones will all start coming with USB Type-C, so give a point to the Nexus 6P for that. As far as display goes, I just want to say that both displays on the phones are great. The Moto X Pure Edition has an IPS LCD display, and the Nexus 6P has an AMOLED display. Now, it's kind of a wash as far as displays go, because even though both of the displays are great, I feel that the Moto X Pure Edition gives a more natural looking display. A lot of times on the Nexus 6P, the display looks a little undersaturated to me, which I know sounds weird because I always talk about how I don't like a display that's too oversaturated, but when I turn off sRGB, the display is too much for me, and then when I turn it on, it just looks a little undersaturated. It's not bad by any means, but I feel that the Moto X Pure Edition gives a better representation of truer colors. So I'm giving that, and as far as whites go too, and indirect sunlight, the Moto X Pure Edition performs better. Now, as far as the 6P, blacks and darker colors, they come up much better. Like a lot, like I was surprised how well it worked. Like I really didn't think about AMOLED and IPS LCD displays as much until I put the two together and I saw the blacks on the Nexus 6P. So a nod off to that for the display. Again, both are great displays, except one does one thing better than the other. All right, speakers. So both phones have front-facing stereo speakers. They're both great speakers. They both sound very loud. I did a comparison for the speakers, and the Nexus 6P actually comes out louder. They do have louder speakers on the phone. And the only problem is even though they're louder, they don't sound as rich or as full as the speakers on the Moto X Pure Edition. So as far as loudness goes, and again, the speakers are both great. Like they're not bad by any means, but I have to nitpick, and so when I pick these things out, these are the things I'm going to talk about. So the Nexus 6P, yes, it is a louder phone, but as far as like richness and like fullness of music goes, that goes to the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, a big gripe of mine on the Moto X Pure Edition is that the Moto X will distort. It will distort, especially on notifications. There's going to be like a crackling or a hissing or both, and I feel like that's just really unacceptable. That's not something that should be happening on these phones at all. So as far as distortion, all that kind of stuff goes, I mean, the Nexus 6P doesn't experience that at all. And finally, the rear camera. I'm not going to talk about the front camera because I think they both work decent. It's not something that I really need to compare with, but the rear cameras, yeah, I would like to compare both of these. I feel like both of these are very important. The Nexus 6P has a 12.3 megapixel rear camera, and the Moto X Pure Edition has a 21 megapixel rear camera, and both of these cameras are great, especially in outdoor lighting. In like brightly lit scenarios, both phones perform well. Where we have issues is in dim light or low light, and that's where the Nexus 6P easily trumps out the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, the Moto X Pure Edition can take pictures in dimly lit areas, but when we start talking about really low light or even close to darkness, forget about it. And a lot of people don't take pictures in that kind of darkness, but I guess when you're in a scenario where you might need it, the Nexus 6P will be your best bet. Now, as far as picture, like the way the pictures come out, when I did that comparison yesterday, I felt like the Nexus 6P had pictures that were a little more yellowish or warmer. Have to do a second part because I really want to see how both of these phones compare in all aspects of lighting, outdoors, indoors, and just in other environments, not just at my place. Both cameras are great. For sure, the Nexus 6P will perform better in low light or at nighttime. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. The last thing is if slow motion is a thing for you, the 6P does slow motion a lot better than the Moto X Pure Edition. I said Nexus 6P, right? The Nexus 6P does slow motion a lot better than the Moto X Pure Edition. 720p, 240 frames per second compared to 120 frames per second on the Moto X Pure Edition. And on the Nexus 6P, you get audio with it, with the slow motion. So I feel like the camera nod goes off to the 6P. Despite the natural colors or anything like that, I still feel like the 6P is probably a better camera overall. Okay, so I don't know if that's helped. I mean, I feel like it's helpful information, but I don't know if that will still help you decide which phone is better for you. If it was up to me, Google would be working with Motorola again and making the next Nexus because they have a great phone, and if I could just combine both of these phones together, I would pick the build and design of the Moto X, but with the battery of the Nexus 6P. I would have this phone with USB Type-C, expandable storage. It's just, there's no perfect phone, guys. And maybe next year there will be, or there'll be something closer to perfect. But for now, these are the two best phones on the market. Whether or not a fingerprint sensor is a deal breaker for you, or expandable storage, or a better battery, it's hard to decide. Both are great phones. You're going to be happy with either decision. I don't know if you guys are going to have buyer's remorse, but you need to take a look at your top priorities. Actually, that's probably the best way to figure it out. Maybe write a list down, talk about what your favorite things are or what your most important things are on a phone, and go from there. So anyway, guys, that's it for now. You know what? I might take a day off because I've been very busy. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this whole series, and you'll be seeing me soon. So take it easy, guys.